Hey you guys, it's Amy Gretchen. Welcome back. So in this video, I'm working on my 2020 December Daily album, and I'm gonna work on days 18 and 19. If I can get the footage together for days 20 and 21, I will include that as well. But if not, this is just gonna be 18 and 19. As you can see, I have a lot of my pieces already finished. I've got, on this photo, I've got my number here that I have foiled on. And then I have all these pieces cut out, and then one of them actually, if I can get it loose, has foil on it. So I'm going to take you to my computer right now and show you all the pieces of this layout. I'm not going to show you exactly how I laid it out, but I will show you the pieces and how I ended up cutting and adding the foil to that. So if you're not interested in that, you can just skip through, but if not, let's head to my computer. So we're going to start in Photoshop, and I'm going to show you the layers that make up this document. So a lot of times when I'm doing things like this where I'm printing a photo and I'm printing journaling and I want it to be in a very specific place, and I want to know, how large I want the graphic. Oh, what fun. I need to put it all together and do it in digital form, even though I'm going to print it separately. So let me just walk you through everything. You could do this in Canva. You could do this in Photoshop Elements, but I am in Photoshop CC. So down here at the bottom, I just have my white paper, just kind of mimics my white paper. And then on top of that, I have some polka dots. So this is a pattern paper from Paisley Press. I think it came in 2019. It technically is black polka dots. So if I uncheck this effect here, you're going to see that it turns to black. I actually have a color overlay, which is making this gray. So if you can see it on the screen, it's very, very subtle. It does print out very subtle, but you can definitely see it. And I think it makes a difference. And I really like the texture that it adds. And then the next layer that we come to is going to be our photo. So this is a photo that I split up in Photoshop. You can see that it is actually one layer because I brought it over in one layer, but I set up this as a print separated into 3 columns. And the reason why I did that is because I thought it would be easier to cut it out in the end. So I wasn't trying to figure out what's actually the center part of this image. And the other reason why I wanted to do that is because we have faces in this picture, and I wanted to make sure I wasn't going to cut off someone's face. So I did that in Lightroom, and then I pulled it in. You can see it as the photo that I've pulled in. And I am going to print it like this. Like I said, you don't have to do this. You could actually just print out your photo or bring in the actual photo without the columns. And then you can just decide where you actually want to trim it once it's already printed out. But I am going to print it out with these columns. Like I said, it's going to help me when I'm trimming this up just to make sure I get everything even. The next thing that I have on here is my number. So you might not be able to see it, but it's right up here in the corner. This is a number that came from an overlay. So Ali Edwards has some overlays. I think this was from 2018. It did have lines all the way around. You can see that I have the lines. If I bring this down, maybe we'd be able to see them. I'm not able to see the lines. Oh, I think it's probably because they are not checked here. There we go. You can kind of see you can see the lines here and behind the photo. If I bring it up, it's going to be on the top layer. And this was attached to the lines, if you recall this file. And what I ended up doing is just taking off this graphic from the lines. And I was thinking about using the lines until I realized I just don't feel like it works with the way I want my day to look. And so I just decided to exclude it. But you could definitely leave it if it was something that you wanted. I really love those templates, and I think that they have a lot of uses, if only just to use the numbers. All right, then the next thing that we're going to come to, this is our graphic. So this is the Oh What Fun file. This came from, I think, last year with part of the December Daily digital files. I'm not 100% sure. I will make sure to link it below if I can find it on the website. So if you like this file, you'll be able to use it as well. So I have this in here as a placeholder because this is something I'm going to cut out from Silhouette, do a little foiling on top. So I have it as a placeholder to see what size I need this to be. Now, fortunately, this file that I brought in was the exact size that I needed. I didn't need to manipulate this at all. So I will be able to just to pull that file into the Silhouette when it is time to do that. But if you have adjusted this graphic in any way, you're going to want to save it and then open that file into Silhouette and use that file to cut with. And then the very top is just the text that I have down here at the bottom. So really easy to put together. Like I said, I really love to do this so I know exactly how things are going to look, and then I can get everything printed in the right place. So the next thing I want to do now that I've got everything together is I'm going to print my background. So the background is going to include the dots and the text. So I'm going to take the eyeball and uncheck all the things that aren't the polka dots and the text. And of course I could just leave the white paper because of that is not going to print, obviously. And then I'm just going to send this to print. So Control-Command-P, I've got my print dialog box. I can adjust things if I want. I like to print black and white on my laser because it definitely just saves me money. I am going to print on 80-pound cardstock. It's Nina Solar White, and then go ahead and click on print. And I'm just going to cancel that because I've already done all of the printing. All right, then the next thing that I want to do is I'm going to print the photo. So I was thinking about whether or not I wanted to actually just print this from Lightroom, but I think I'm just going to print it from here. It doesn't really matter where you print it from. So I'm going to uncheck on the polka dots. I'm going to check on the photo that we want, and then I'm going to uncheck on the text. So then I can just go ahead and I can print out this file, Control-Command-P, print that out, and now I've got my photo that I'm going to print. I do not want to print it on my laser printer. I am going to come up to my Canon IP8700. This is new to me. I think it's a really great printer. I did a lot of research. If you're in the market, I thought it was well priced and it prints really beautiful prints. So you can go ahead and just print that. I am going to cancel that because, like I said, I've already printed it. But I just made a mistake that I made the first time I did this. So the first time I did this, I just printed the photo and everything was great. And then I realized I forgot to add the number. So if you're going to do this and you want to have the number, then make sure you click on this and then go ahead and print. So when I did this the first time, I didn't add it. So what I ended up doing is I added it later with foil. And ultimately, as I'm working through, and you'll see this as I'm working through putting this together, I have a really hard time seeing the foil. It does not stand out at all. I should have done a different color foil. I know they have black foils that you could use, and I just did not want to reprint the photo. So I probably should have just left it out and then done what I did, which I added it to a star, but you'll see that coming up. So anyway, don't forget to add the number if you want to add the number and print that on. All right, then if you want, the last thing that you can do, and I think I will just uncheck. Well, no, I'll leave that on. But this, oh, what fun. Like I said, if you change this in any way, you're going to want to save it. So if it's the only thing that you can see, you can go to File and then Export and Export As. Like I said, anything on this file that you have, checked the eyeball that's visible, you're going to save. And I want to save this as a PNG, and I want to save it as a transparency because I want to be able to cut up this file. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit export, and then it's going to ask me where I want to export this, and I will export this to my desktop. That'll just be really easy for me to bring that file into Silhouette. So I'm going to hit export, and now it's exporting this file for me. And now if I want, I can click on these files just so I have everything, visible so I can see it as I'm putting it together if I need to reference it. So that is how I worked with my file. So now I'm going to X out of this and we're going to come to the Silhouette. And now I have my file on my desktop that I'm just going to bring in. This is the file that we just saved. And I think it didn't save it as a transparency, and that's probably because and let me bring up let me see if I can fix this for us. I'm going to bring up my Photoshop one more time. And I should have unchecked the white. I was thinking that it was not going to make a difference, but it actually made a difference. So now I'm going to come to export and export as. And now I'm just going to export it again. And I will replace it. When I save it, it's going to ask me to replace it. And I will just replace it. So now when we bring that file in, and I'm going to delete this out. Now when we bring this file in, it's going to be just the words because it's going to be a transparency. So there you go. You can see that we've got just the words. And now the words have come in outlined in red. That means it's already traced for us. I think that I don't know if that's because it's a PNG file or if it's because there's an auto trace sometimes, or I've heard about an auto trace with Silhouette. I don't know if it happens with every version or just the business edition that I'm using. But if yours is not traced, if you don't see the red outline, you just come over here to the trace panel, click on select trace area, and then you're just going to want to come up and highlight everything and then click on trace. Now I'm not going to do that because I already have my trace line and I definitely don't want to do two. All right, so now that I've got everything, now that I've got my file ready to go, I'm just going to pull out a little bit. Maybe that was a little too far. I'm just going to bring this down so we can see. Make sure my paper is set to 8.5 by 11 because that's what the paper that I'm going to be using. And I'm going to bring up our words just into the corner, and I'm going to make a copy of 4 because I want this word to be almost chipboard like. I want it to come off of the page, so I want to do multiple. So I'm going to stack them together. Sorry about that movement. I'm going to hit Option and drag, and then I'm going to do it again. And then I'm going to do it one more time. I want 4 copies of this. And with this copy, since it's not fitting, I'm just going to turn it with hovering over the green dot and then clicking on the space bar, clicking on Shift so that it will constrain it to 45-degree increments. That'll just make it a little bit easier to rotate. And then I'm just going to nestle it in here. It just needs to be within this red line. And in fact, I'm going to move this out of the way a little bit because I know that this file down here, I don't want it to be so close to the edge because this is the one we are going to foil first before we cut. All right, so now that we have this one highlighted, and that's the one we want highlighted, just want to make sure we've got it selected. And then we're going to come down to the star, and we're going to make an offset path here. Not an offset path, we're going to do an internal offset path because what we're going to create is the line that's going to trace around each of the letters, and that line is what we're going to foil. We just want a little texture to this. Just a little something to kind of help it pop off the page. So I'm going to click on internal offset, and you can see how I'm going to bring this up a little bit so we can see this a little bit better. Move it into place. And you can see that it's made these lines in the middle, and that is going to be based on this value here. So we are just going to click down on the down arrow. You could enter the numbers that you want to, but I just want you to watch as this line changes, as this number changes. And we want to make sure that we are getting the line so it is close to the edge, but not too close. We want to make sure that we're not getting any of the lines touching here. That's pretty close, but we don't want it so close to the edge that there might be an issue with some cutting. So we're going to make sure, I think that actually looks pretty good, or maybe come down one more, and that actually looks really good as well. So that is where I'm going to leave it. I will let you guys decide what you want to do with whatever file you are working on. Now I'm going to make sure to keep this selected, and I'm going to come over to the line panel and then come over here to the colored lines. And I'm going to change this to green, and I'm doing this for a specific reason because what we want to do with this file is we want to foil first and then we want to cut. And we want to do that without having to unload our mat. So we're just going to try and do it all together. In fact, I'm seeing this is really close here. So I'm not going to change it because I've already done this, but I might want to go down one more just because this line is really close here. Just a heads up, I might have gone down to 0.4 or 0.04. All right, so I'm going to do Control Command minus just so I can see our entire document. And then I'm going to come over to send. So in the send panel, you can see in this simple area that we've got everything highlighted. Everything is highlighted in red, but I want to come over to the line panel here. And when I do that, you can see that we've got our red lines and we have our green lines. And that's exactly what we want because we're going to be cutting our red lines and we're going to be foiling or sketching our green line. So let's set this up. In my silhouette, I have my blade in the first tool. So I'm going to keep it in this first tool. If you have a silhouette with only one tool, that's fine. When your machine is done foiling, what you're going to do is just take out your foil quill and then put in your blade, and then you'll be able to come back here and hit send. All right, so then we've got the cardstock, and the cardstock that we want to use for the cutting is going to be our 80-pound cardstock, and I just use this cardstock texture that works really well. I do end up putting my force up to 33, and I do that because my blade is a little old, but it does cut pretty well. If yours is maybe really old, you might want to do 2 passes, but that actually works really well for me. And then make sure my action is set to cut. And then the next line for our green line, this is going to be what we are foiling. So I'm actually going to use the second tool. So the right tool, this is where I'm going to have my foil quill. And then for the paper, it can be plain. That's totally fine. I usually do plain. And then I'm going to change my action to sketch here. So if I come down here to force, you know what, to be honest, I have used the 7 and I've gone all the way up to 10. One thing that I have noticed when it comes to force and using the foil quill is I feel like the more force you use, the duller the foil gets. I don't know why that is, but that's just something that I've experienced. So I think I'm going to bring this up to an 8, and that actually tends to work really well for me. So that is the settings that I'm going to be using, but definitely use the settings that work for you, or you can try this out and see how this works. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're just going to do the foiling. And the reason is because we're going to set up our mat and put the foil down, and I don't want to cut over the foil. I have done this before by accident and it does cut and it is okay, but I think that it's kind of sloppy and it sometimes doesn't work out really great, and sometimes you end up with foil all over the place. So I really like to do my foiling, take my foil off, and then do my cutting. And so that is what we're going to do today. So let's just set it up to do the foil first. I am going to uncheck the top layer. So the cut layer, we're going to uncheck that because we're just going to do the foil. And now we are going to head over to the desk and we're going to put our mat together. So as I'm setting up my mat here, I'm putting down my cardstock that I'm going to be using, and I'm using the sticky mat instead of the metal mat that I like to use for the foil quill because we're going to be cutting and you cannot cut on the metal. So just keep that in mind. And then I'm going to make sure that I have my foil in the place where the word is going to be foiling. So it's in the bottom corner. You're just going to want to go and look at that to make sure that you're getting your foil in the right place, and then just put everything down with washi tape. I also like to take away some of the stick of the washi tape just so it's not so sticky, to make sure that it's not going to rip any of my paper. Now that I have my foil down and my mat ready to go, I'm going to load it into my machine. So I've loaded it into my machine, and here is my foil quill that I'm going to insert into the right tool. And you can see that it's all lit up and it's hot and it's ready to go. I like to heat up my foil probably to like 10 minutes. I like for it to sit. 5 minutes is probably good enough. And you can see that I also just have an extension cord that I have my foil quill plugged into right by my machine. And then I do like to move the cord out of the way so it just does not get in the way as my machine is working. All right, so now we are all ready to go. And now since we have this all ready to go, we know that it's on the green layer. We can just go ahead and hit send and it's going to do its magic. So now that we have our foiling done, we are going to remove the foil from the cardstock. Now this is the most important part of this process, which is do not unload your machine. The reason why I have the foil in the bottom corner, so I can easily take off the foil without it being an issue. So what you want to do is leave the mat in. Do not unload it. That is so essential, because if you unload it, you might not load it exactly right, and then it's not going to cut in the proper place. So just make sure you keep it loaded, take off the foil, and then come back to your machine. So now that we are back at our machine, we're going to unclick on the green, and then we're going to click on our red, and you can see that it's changing. So now that our green is grayed out, it's not going to do anything with that line, and it's just going to now cut this file, and it's all ready to go. We've taken off our foil, we've left it loaded, and now we're just ready to hit send. All right, so I'm at my desk and I've got all of the pieces all ready to go so that we can assemble this all together. I've got my photo cut up into thirds. I've got my cut up words, and then I have my background layer. And the first thing that I want to do is put on my photos. So I have this design, so the photos are going to be at the very edge. So I thought it'd be easier to put the photos on first. So I ended up partially cutting this file out. So the top and the left side, I cut at the accurate place, and I'm going to wait until I put on the back of day 17 before I fully cut it out. So I was just trying to figure out exactly where I needed to put those photos based on where my polka dots landed. All right, and then I'm going to stack up these cut words. So I've got several cut words, and I'm going to stack them on top of one another by using some liquid adhesive. I like to use liquid adhesive because it allows me to kind of move things around, gives me a moment to move it around before it's, glued into place. So that's why I like to use that. And then I went ahead and I adhered the back onto day 17 and I cut it out. And now I'm just kind of trying to align the existing holes with the hole punch so I can get it punched out in the same place. And then as I'm putting down the words, I realize I really cannot see that 18. You can kind of see in the top corner where I told you guys that I did some foiling. I find it really hard to see. And so I thought, I need to add an 18 to this. And so I grabbed over some of these glittery chipboard stars. I think they came in last year's kit. I'm not 100% sure. I know that they've done white ones in the past. And I thought this might be a really great option to add a number to. So I grabbed over some of my number stickers. You can see that I was trying to look at which color I wanted to use, whether it be white, red, or black. I ultimately really did love the way the black looked, and so I went with that. And now the last thing that I'm going to do is adhere down the Oh What Fun chipboard that we made. And again, I'm using some adhesive glue or liquid adhesive glue, just so that I'm able to kind of move it around and get it in the place I want to before, stuck down really well. And then I'm going to take a minute and think about where I want that star before I adhere it down. You can see that I was looking to see if I wanted maybe a smaller one. Ultimately, I end up choosing the larger one, but I do wait till after I've worked on day 19 to make that final decision. So for day 19, I'm actually using a file that I created in Allie Edwards' December Daily Prep Party last year. So if you were a part of that class, you can head over to that classroom and you can check out exactly how I created that file. If not, I believe it's only $5 and you can check out how I created this, but I definitely wanted to use it for this year. You can see that I had created it for day 10, but it ended up not working out that way. And so I decided to use it for day 19, and I just went ahead and changed the numbers. And now you can see that I'm cutting up the word strips. So I did the journaling on some word strips. I thought that that would be the easiest way to get them into the circles. Of course, you could just handwrite these as well. You don't have to cut them up, but there is something really fun about word strips. I think that it kind of adds a little whimsy, a little something extra. So I think sometimes it's fun to include that. And then I'm just adding them to each of the dots. I did try and go in chronological order, but honestly, it doesn't really matter. These were just a few of the things that happened on day 19. It ended up being my anniversary, but we didn't technically really spend it in the way that we would traditionally spend our anniversary. We were doing things, last minute things that we needed to do for Christmas and spending time with family. And I was taking some photos for Megan, and it was just a really a busy night. And so I just wrote about some of the things that we actually did that day. We did go to lunch together with the kids. So that was fun. You know, you have years like that, right? From time to time. All right, so I wanted to add one thing in this last little circle. I think it says celebrated 24 years because that was the anniversary we were celebrating. And then I'm just going to add this pink heart. I wish I had added the red heart ultimately to kind of go with the joy and the fa la la transparency circle, but I went and did the pink, and that's going to be totally fine, not a big deal. All right, so we are actually moving on to days 20 and 21. Like I mentioned earlier, I might be including them, and I definitely am. So I'm going to be using one of the 3-up page protectors. So it's got 2 3x4s on the top and then 1 4x6 at the bottom. And I'm going to be doing 20 on one side and then 21 on the other side. And so I thought it would actually be easier to do them at the same time, because maybe I will want to include, not include embellishments, but use one embellishment that's on the back side. So I've got both of my photos in place, and then I've cut up my journaling. I believe this journaling that I'm cutting through now is a little bit too small. So in the end, I end up reprinting it, and you'll see why I end up reprinting it. There's definitely a reason why. And then for the day 20, there was a sentiment from Paisley Press that said all together for the holidays. And I actually wanted to print it on my photo. And then I thought, you know what? It'd be fun if it was a little bit more 3D, if it had a little bit of texture. And so I thought, I've been doing a lot of foiling. Why don't I use vinyl this time? And so I grabbed over some white vinyl. I think this is just from Silhouette, and I cut the file with the vinyl, and you can see that I'm having kind of a struggle trying to get it off of the paper because the pieces are so small, and that I was definitely having a hard time releasing the inside of those words. Obviously, the together word is a lot bigger, and I was not having a problem with that, but I was having a problem with those really small words. And I thought, I'm still going to try and do this. I think this will look really cool. And so I went and grabbed over some of the contact paper, and I'm going through the process of transferring this vinyl onto the contact paper so that I can put it. And my thought was to put it on the page protector. I could have put it on a transparency. I don't think this will really work well putting this on a photo, because that contact paper would stick so much to the photo. So anyway, I go through the process, and as I'm trying to smash it down, you can see that I kind of brought all of those letters together and kind of smashed them all together. So yeah, that didn't work out. So I thought, you know what? We're going to go back to what I love, which is the foil quill. And we're going to add this detail with the foil quill. So because I wanted to add the vinyl to my page protector, I thought, why not do the foil to the page protector? I haven't done that before, but it works really well with transparency. This is basically a transparency. I think that it's going to work really, really well. And so I grab over my transparency, I put down my foil, and then I send it to my foil quill. And now I'm working, and I'm letting that do its magic. It's actually working in the background. And in the meantime, I'm actually going through a lot of different transparencies that I have and trying to decide what transparency I want to use for one of those 3x4 slots. All right, so now you can see that I'm done with the foiling. And of course I got washi tape on my photo. That's just totally something I would do. And you can see how good that looks on the page protector. So you guys use the foil quill on your transparency, use it on your page protector. I honestly have not seen a surface that's flat that the foil quill has not been able to foil onto. So I'm kind of determined to figure that out. All right, so now I'm trying to figure out the left side, that pocket, and how to embellish it. So I found a star that came in the 2020 kit, I believe. It is a transparency star. I really like the color and I really like the sentiment. I think it was about gathering. Now I can't remember. So I was thinking about that, having that on day 21. And now I'm trying to figure out what to do on the flip side. And so I thought, you know what, because it's a transparency, I think I need to back it with a piece of paper or a pattern. And so I grabbed over this paper that I had printed sometime last year. I literally was just going through my stash of papers and things that I had. You can see that I have some 4x6 paper as well. And then I'm sticking them back to back and I'm trying to figure out what I want to do on top for that day 20. And cutting out just a couple little pieces that were hanging out over the edge. And I'm kind of looking at that and trying to figure it out. And you know, I'm going to go through a whole bunch of different ideas of adding other stars, of hearts, of going through my stash, seeing what else I have. This is kind of the process of play. Sometimes I really like it, and sometimes it kind of stresses me out where I wish it was just like the pieces were already laid out and then I could just assemble everything together. I don't always feel like that, but sometimes I definitely do. All right, so I pulled over my numbers. So I'm trying to figure out how to add 20 to the day 20. And then I remembered these numbers that I'd included a couple of times. These came from Sahin Design, and I will have it linked below. And I found I found the number 21, and I thought that's what I'm going to use for day 21. So I just kind of have that pulled aside. It's upside down, so you can't really see it, but you will a little bit later. And then in the other container where I have some numbers, I was just kind of searching through and I saw that I had a 0 felt. And I remember I had die cut these. I think I have a tutorial on YouTube, or on Instagram, but I definitely want to make more of these because I really need more red numbers. And then I magically had a 2. Like, I cannot believe I actually had a 2 and a 0. And so as I was laying that down, I realized, you know what, those stripes are just a little too much. And so I turned it over and it had that subtle polka dot, and I'm like, oh, I think this will be perfect. And now I'm not 100% settled on my transparency. So I'm still just kind of going through and trying to decide what transparency I want. It's kind of funny because as I'm looking back at this footage, I did like the gold hearts a lot. And I think what I didn't like is one side was gold and one side was silver. And both of my photos I felt were pretty warm because they were on the inside of the house. And so I didn't want one of the sides to be silver. So that was really throwing me off. So ultimately I decided to go with this transparency that had some subtle white stars. It's actually kind of hard to see because my table is white, but it will look really good with whatever I put behind it. You'll definitely be able to see the stars. That's why I brought over that black piece of paper, just so you can see how it's going to look. So I really love that with the polka dot, and I really love that with the 20, but I felt like it was a little too much white. And so that's when I decided to reprint 21 because it was messed up, and then redo day 20 so that it was on a red backdrop. And so because of the way I printed it, I accidentally printed a little bit too small. So instead of, worrying about that and reprinting it, I just decided that it would have a white border. And I actually think I like the way that turned out, even though it was not how I had originally intended it. So I think that looks really good. And now I'm just using the mini stapler from Tim Holtz to staple those in place. and kind of adhered the stars together on the transparency just so they wouldn't move around when they were inside the pocket. So that is going to be it for day 21, or excuse me, day 20. And then for day 21, the last thing that I'm going to do is adhere the number onto the photo. And then I do in the end add a staple to that just because there's a staple in the star. So I thought that that would just be one more piece of added texture that I could add to the spread. So anyway, you guys, that is going to be it for days 18, 19, 20, and 21. So super happy that I was able to get so much in this video considering I missed sharing December Daily last week. So thank you guys so much for being here. Like always, if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments section below and I will definitely get to them. And if you guys are new here, I hope that you would consider subscribing and then hitting that bell so that you will be notified whenever a new video goes live. Again, thank you guys so much, and we will see you in the next one. Bye.